I've had situations where the racial experiences were right in the face, coming from going to an event in a suit and being told by the person who knew me that the plates are ready to be collected, to having to having weekly meetings, thinking, am I being performance checked after having the greatest appraisal ever, to then have weekly meetings starting off by, oh, so why do Black people get bothered by the N-word?
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Listen In podcast. My name's Aravana.
My name is Anya.
And my name's Boomy.
Let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Listen In podcast. We have a very special guest. This one is really exciting for me because he's actually a really good friend of mine. This is Rex. We've invited him onto the show today just to talk a bit about himself. He's actually a principal lecturer and program leader for accounting at a university in London. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Rex, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi Anna, hi everyone. First and foremost, it's a pleasure to have to be here, shall we say. You know what, you said it was a special thing, now you're making me feel nervous, so let's go with this. So as you said, I'm part of the University of Hertfordshire, and I am the program leader for an accounting course, and I'm here to basically talk to you about what my story has been. So I'll share a bit about me, not just from the professional side, but I think judged by your podcast, it's important to see the person, the identity, and the importance of identity. So I'll be lacing the conversation around that for sure.
I actually have one question from what you've said in terms of the person, the identity. So
yes,
how would you identify yourself in terms of your ethnicity? Are you happy to kind of tell us about your sort of background and things like that?
Absolutely. I'd like to be very transparent and state straight off the bat, I am someone who's born in Ghana, Accra, and proud to be a Ghanaian. I don't remember much of it because I moved to the UK. My family were in the UK, raised by my grandma till I was 3, came to the UK, and I started living in Milton Keynes at first. So I did a lot of my nursery there. I don't remember much of that as well. And then I moved over to Gants Hill, Essex area, which is known in Ilford. So I was there for a while. And actually, when I consider my identity, I think my parents did a very good job reminding me of who I am. So I'll give you an example, small example. In school, we were all told, okay, we've got reading hour for 15 minutes. And a lot of the students came with Harry Potter books and all of that stuff. I was more interested about where I was from. So even starting off by reading about Ghana as an empire and Mali, and then considering my people and where they came from and how they've reached out to other nations and how they've developed and influenced culture. So there was a lot about that in terms of identity that I thought was useful, but at the same time, I needed to know who I was as a Ghanaian. It's not just good enough to say I'm a Black man and I'm a Ghanaian, therefore, who should I follow who's like me? I'm still a unique individual. So it was important to understand what I was fascinated by, what I was good at, and continuously grow in that identity. So in long story short, I'm still figuring myself out, but I know who I am.
That's great.
Great, excellent. That's really interesting, really good to hear.
Okay, so can you tell us about your journey from school, through education, through university, up to the point that you're at now?
Okay, so I think if I start from secondary school, otherwise the rest is common knowledge. Everyone's got the same story, really. It actually began in one of my English classes in secondary school, where I wasn't taking education seriously. But I do remember being in trouble by the English teacher, and she sat me and my friends down and said we would amount to nothing, that the most that we should achieve for is a job at Tesco's. And bearing in mind, at that point, I wasn't aware of racism. I don't think there was an element of racism to that at all. I was misbehaving. But at that point, I thought I had the point to prove. Why is education so important? I mean, fun and games was important at that age. So having learned a couple of things, learning my identity, I thought, okay, let me give it a try. After I got that message from the teacher. So I ended up with a couple of B's and C's and GCSEs, still not taking it that seriously. A level, again, B's and C's, not taking it seriously. And I ended up at a university that my sister was at already. I didn't really think about the choice. All I knew is my auntie was an accountant. I liked the job. She had Cineworld as a partner in firm. So I was able to go and watch movies before everyone. That was the main reason why I looked into accounting. So nothing to do with the subject itself. It was money and perks. That was it. That continued when I got into the university realm. So like any adult, like any male adult, shall we say, black male, going into a new environment where there is no restrictions at all. You all think you're adults. You're living in a bubble. It was just partying, etc., etc. I won't talk about too much. But basically, we were just misbehaving. It just continued. I wasn't going to classes. I knew one end of university, which is, yes, well, I'm here for studying, but I don't really care about that. And so even with that in mind, I was still getting average grades. And then there was one moment we were going to a party. It was called Batchwoods back then. It was a little mansion that was hired out for raves. And there was this guy crying. I was thinking, what is wrong with him? Like, he must have been stood up by someone or something. But he then came up to us. We were still thinking, what is he on about? But he started saying, guys, make sure you take uni seriously. Make sure you take uni seriously. Even though I added that in the story, I didn't really care about that. We just laughed that off completely. And then one of the lecturers came up to us and said, all right, looking at my friends, they just stared at us, and we were all our black people in one area, just stared at us and said, you know what, you guys really don't even know what uni's about. I don't think you would achieve anything either. And we thought, what is he talking about? This is not right. So we again took this approach of, we need to prove people wrong, which I'd like to mention is not the best approach at all times, but that was the approach we took. Long story short, got together with a couple of my friends, majority of them were black friends, and we decided to basically try a lot harder. We decided to take a keen interest in what we were doing. So I started to get B's and A's rather than B's and C's. I got a really good job for my placement year, graduated with a first class degree, and immediately, because I transitioned from someone who didn't care about uni to someone who managed to get first, I thought, you know what, there's a lot of people like me. There was people in lower years I knew that was struggling as well. So we designed a business plan where we decided to give back. So one of my friends, Nathan Gunn, decided to run a business called How on Earth Do I Get It First? So we stayed in education. So we were mentoring students from all disciplines, just saying, look, giving the aspect that really doesn't get given enough in tutoring. So tutoring is all about getting the education within and installed into students, but we wanted to see the student as a whole being and say, look, what are your struggles? What's your character like? Is it right? Is it appropriate? With that in mind, we're getting a lot of students achieving the first and 2-1, and universities heard about us and what we were doing. So Nathan went off on one project, I went off on another project, and I had a project with the accounting department to try and make sure we can deliver on those students who are disengaging. That was a successful project. I absolutely loved that. At the same time, I was in a good job at Tesco's as a financial recovery auditor. And I realized very quickly when I looked at both professions, I liked what I was doing as an accountant. When I look at my cultural peers, when I look at my family, making them proud, my mum going on the phone to my auntie, my son, he's doing a good job. And I was like, all right, relax, it's just a graduate role, relax. That was going well, but I really saw that I loved helping students. I mean, I could be reviewing work, it would be 10 o'clock, I haven't eaten yet, and I thought, something's wrong with me. This is definitely more interesting to me, impacting lives than spreadsheets, that's for sure. So with that in mind, the first thing I did as a black man is looked at education and thought, how much do they pay? And I wasn't happy about the pay structure. So I stuck with doing things in the accounting world. So I left Tesco after a couple of years, and then I went straight to Marsh & Lennon and their reinsurance brokerage firm. Funny enough, in that job, it was a financial analyst role. I ended up teaching people in that role. And they all started saying, look, I think you're really good at this. So that brought me back into the project. So I spoke to one of the head of departments, who's now the associate dean, and he spoke to me, sorry, the deputy dean, and he spoke to me and said, I think you've got the ingredients for this. So I went into it and I thought, okay, let's go full throttle. But little did you guys know that I was actually quite nervous as an individual, speaking in public spaces. I can help people individually, but I was quite nervous and reserved when I was speaking or public speaking. So I thought, I didn't have the ingredients. Let me take the usual approach of aging in accounting, get to about 55, 60 and become that typical lecturer, you know, retire, have a nice pension pot there. But I thought there was something missing. I need to do it now. So I made that switch, had a nervous interview, a challenging interview, which I'll probably save for later. And yeah, they gave me the job. And I thought they were crazy, absolutely crazy. Because yeah, they told me to basically pretend to do a lecture. And the topic I had no idea about. And I was faking it completely. But they gave me the job. I think they saw the potential in what I had to do. So that's the transition I had into lecturing. It was all about, okay, I'll take the usual route, a graduate route in accounting, do really well in that, but actually I followed my passion and what I love doing. That was very clear to see.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah.
And I just want to go back a bit. So you mentioned some points during education where, for example, you was in school and that English teacher said to you and your friends that basically they don't see any potential in you. And then you had a very similar message said to you when you was at university as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that make you feel at the time?
I think that's a good question. I think everyone reacts to it differently because I was not alone, which was the interesting dynamic to this. It was with a group of friends at each time. And you sort of look around to your friends to see how they feel. So emotionally, it doesn't click straight away. You don't react to your own self-emotion. You react as a group. So I'm looking around to see what are they thinking. And obviously we are hyped to say, oh, he's mad, he's crazy, this person's talking rubbish, blah, blah, blah. But then when you go back to your own dorms, then you start to think and you're going, are they right? And then I look back at my grades and there are moments, let's not get it wrong, that I did try in certain modules because I did have a keen interest in certain things and I still got an average grade regardless. So I thought, do you know what? Let me look around me. And I think this is where my parents helped a lot because they've done quite well in their fields. And I thought, okay, what they're talking about is absolute rubbish. And I think this is where the identity clicked as well. So looking at Ghana history, looking at what successes have been influencing and infiltrating other cultures with my identity, I thought, no, this can't be true. But at the same time, looking into education, I couldn't find someone that was someone I could look up to. Even around me, even people above years, because remember my sister was at the university as well. So it was that sense of feeling saying, you know what, maybe I need to do something about it. And maybe there's some truth to it, but I'm not going to let that become a truth. So it was all about taking the right paths at that moment. So ignoring the sense of, okay, they are correct. Let's find out, because I'm very much a practical person. Let's find out if they're true. Let me give it my all and see if that's the right outcome, what they predicted.
I think it's also really interesting, like the sort of initiative that you and your friend came up with to help other students, disengaged students. Was there anything in particular that you found was really helpful for them, like a tip that you could give some of our listeners that are students? Because we do have a lot of students and things listening, and some of them have reached out to us and said, I'm not doing well at uni, you know, what did you guys do to be successful? Is there like one or two tips that you could give them to kind of shift their mind in the same way that you did?
Absolutely. I think I've got a little bit of a religious background as well, but I'm not going to apply it wholesomely. I'm going to say, look, I'm going to take it as a proverbial sentence. And it's basically stating that sometimes we look for a direct solution, but the direct solution isn't what you should be looking for to reach your outcomes. So I tell students all the time that yes, there was a method to attainment, there was a method to do well when you were in secondary school, but the metrics in secondary school were entirely different. So therefore, when you get to the academic level, it's incredibly important that you look at self. And when you look at self, ask yourself, are you doing enough? Are you prioritizing enough to get through? And are you playing smart? I'll give you an example. I had a student who should have been withdrawn from university, but unfortunately, the reasons behind why he was doing badly is because he suffered a death in the family through gun crime. So he had another chance to finish the year. So he was now switched on, he's engaging. So after that, everyone would think engagement equals results. So I told him, listen, you've got to revise for this assessment. He said, look, Rex, I've got this. And then every day he came back to me to report, Rex, I've been in the library for 24/7. Do you have faith in me now? I said, no. And he goes, what? What are you talking about? How could you say that to me? I said, keep revising. I think you won't pass. The key thing is we keep looking at our action points and thinking, okay, that's enough. It's are you playing it smart? Think about who's marking your work. The student didn't realize I was the assessor. And I knew the strategy he was taking was the wrong one. I wasn't testing that. All I needed for him to do is ask. So when he failed, he came back to me and then he asked. And I said, look, this is the character you were missing. I did not question the thoughts you put through, the efforts you put through. I didn't question that at all. But you forgot to ask the source. So take the right characters, look at the right things. Don't look to your friends for efforts. Don't look to your friends for validations. Look to the source, no matter how much they are. Break down the barriers, speak to them. What are they looking for? How are they looking to assess you? That's very important, in my opinion, for students who are in education at the moment.
Yeah, I think we've discussed this as well, even in our previously, I think in a podcast of, you know, it's that sort of hidden learning as well, isn't it? Some people, they do have the family background, or maybe their parents have been through university in this country. They know the different things that you need to do and things like that, but other people don't really have those opportunities and those skills. So it's a lot to sort of learn that alone. But I like what you're saying about, you know, looking at the situation and looking at how you can ask the right people for support. I think that's really important.
Absolutely, and I'd like to add that they do have it in them. So one thing we like to do in class when they come into first year is to ask, because we've got accounting students, they like maths, they like numbers. And I ask them, do they like writing, do they like research? And they all say no. But then we go into a topic that shows that actually they're good at it. So for instance, if it's sports, I ask them, who do you support? And they'll say Arsenal. I'm going to use this example because I'm an Arsenal fan. And I say, great, why are you an Arsenal fan? And they said, oh, because they're the best. They've got all these trophies, all of that. Bearing in mind, these students were born in 1999, right? Or 2000. I said, okay, give me an example. Oh, so in 1998 or in 1997, I said, how did you know? And they said, well, it's on social media, it's on that. And I said, that's information you weren't even born yet. How did you know? So they didn't realize until I asked again to say, I'm telling you, you're doing research. You know the latest Balenciagas, you know everything like that. You know what's current, but you don't have the same vibe for your degree. And it's temporary. Can you do the same thing for your degree just for a couple of years, please? And that's the sort of thing I'm trying to get out, that it's not two alternative realities, it's the same thing.
Do you think that educational attainment, or even what you looked like a few years ago, do you think that determines the course of your life? Because I get a bit irked up sometimes when I hear lecturers say, well, if you don't take it seriously, you're going to end up in McDonald's. We know now, especially in this generation, that there is more ways, there's more than one ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
It's not just through education. Yes, I am up for getting a formal education, but there are people who go down the route of apprenticeship, go down different ways to attain something. So, and I think it's just wrong for someone to say that to a student.
Yes.
And so, like, just let me know, like, your take on this, especially now that you're a lecturer. Do you think that educational performance, especially in formal education, determines the outcome of a person's life?
I actually do like that question, and I will reiterate because I know what I'm about to say. This is definitely my opinion and not the universities. There is some metrics that pertains to that advice. And it's not solely just on that individual receiving that advice. So if we say your A-level results, if you don't do this, you can't become that. Even that same statement is actually said to first years as well. And in fact, I'm going to work it a bit backwards and look at some first year students I'm dealing with, because I'm currently level 4 year tutor. And you can clearly see just when you spend some time with these students that they shouldn't be at university. You ask the questions. Of course, you're young, you're not sure of where you're going to go. That's fine. But when you look at their aspirations, their goals, what they're executing in life, you're thinking, what are you doing here? In fact, why are you on this course? And there are so many reasons why we study. And sometimes culturally or socially, we've got a social contract that tells we must be a doctor, we must be a nurse, we must be doing this and that. So there's a lot to unravel before we get to the source here. But what I do understand, and I agree with you, is sometimes when we look at authority, they try and give one message so that they can get the masses. But that one message is not for everyone when considered individually. So there's some people who would be like, you know what, I don't know what I want in life, someone guide me. Fine, that message works. But if you truly are troubled by that message, there are alternatives. And I do stress that if you feel like you're not comfortable with the route you're taking, there are alternatives, and that advice is needed as well. I don't think there's enough structural support. So for instance, there is, I forgot what it's called, I think there's apprentice roles as well. And there's a lot of that going on. And I've seen a lot of students say, you know, I'd rather do this, I get paid as well. Now, that's also a problem, because the reason behind it is questionable. You need to do it for the right reasons. There's, for instance, Deloitte apprentice roles. But if you take that apprentice role, remind yourself of the risks. So everything that's going on, understand what the risks are, weigh it up, and then take it and go for it. There are so many avenues. And sorry to prolong this, but even as a lecturer, I was told you need to have a PhD before you enter this arena. But there was a way around it. So if you're right for it, you will get it.
That's really interesting. The fact that you're a lecturer, I automatically assumed, and again, we talked about openness, our own biases and everything on this platform. Absolutely. I automatically assumed that you must have a PhD. So I think that's really important for people to hear, actually, to know that even to that level of educational attainment, there are, if you, like you said, if you're right for it, there are ways around it. Absolutely. That's brilliant. And one more thing as well, and I think you kind of started to talk about it a bit, like when you said that obviously you didn't really think about your career path, like when you, and I still, again, I might be wrong here, but I still feel like there isn't enough done to help students, especially going from college to university, to determine what they should do. And also, and I know that this is kind of like an individualistic thing anyway, it's not enough for someone to tell you what you should be doing, but I think there isn't enough guidance around that. So what would you say to someone, and I know that we probably necessarily don't have that kind of a youngish audience of like students coming from like A-level, to university, but what could be happening is that, and I suspect this could be the case, that there might be someone listening to this who's thinking, I'm not sure this is the career path I should be going down. I've probably done it for society, or I've done it for whatever reason. What sort of advice would you give to someone based on your experience around choosing the career for themselves?
That's another good question. I think there needs to be more support from this perspective. Me personally, I've done a lot of employability events where I actually take students to the likes of Deloitte so they can actually see that accounting is just not a computer job. Yep. There is not enough done so that people can witness, even if it's a day trip in secondary school, witness what goes on. Maybe YouTube can help, but there's not enough. The amount of students that get it wrong in terms of what's installed for them is an issue. So I think before that decision is made in terms of what career path you should take and whether it's a mistake, really see what you are getting yourself into. So even in the medical profession, you can be a doctor, you can be a pediatrician. There's so many branches. In accounting, it's the same, but what are you looking at? And if you feel like you've made a mistake, it depends which what timeline you're in. So if you haven't made your decision of what course you're taking yet, I suggest there needs to be more research done in, okay, what sort of companies are leading in this industry? What is this industry saying, and where do I fit in this industry? The number one thing I teach level 4 students when they come through, or shall I say first year students when they come through, is tell me what you aspire to. And it wouldn't be a skill set. It would be, unfortunately, it would be, okay, what do they own? What properties and assets do they own? Who do they connect with? And what differences do they make? Once you've decided that, work backwards. So have a look at the job descriptions that are out there for that very top job and see what are the essentials. Then see what lines that you can take. And you realize, hang on, it's not just a one line approach, i.e., I don't need to become this person to become that person. You work backwards, you then realize what roles are important for you to get there, and it gives you more options. So that's one way to clarify what journey you're on before you make the decision of, okay, if this is a mistake. And I'm aware of universities like ours, we're trying to create a platform or an arena for students to say, hands up, this is the wrong course, can I change? And they just need to be open about that. In fact, in induction week, I made it half of my talk to bring in students who felt they made the mistake last year to say, okay, what did you do? How did you go about it? How do you feel? It's not too late. And I think that's very useful and an interesting question to ask.
It's definitely really good. Very power packed there. Thanks, Rex. I think, like, I've been thinking a lot about this, probably like partly because of my journey as well, that actually I feel like sometimes because of the way society is shaped, academics just back to back to back to back to back. And if you think about how much your career choices and the decisions you make, like after A levels, I mean, up to the point of A levels is not that specific. The older you get, the more specific things become, if that makes sense. You go into an area of specialism. And I just feel like, I wish, I've said this repeatedly to my husband, that I wish there was a break between A levels and university, where a person could take 3 months, 6 months, a year even, to actually, if there are mentors already in that career, to actually give them a range of experiences. And I know that we do work experience at secondary school, but it's not the same. If these people are looking for further education and attainment in a formal setting, then that's not necessarily what they're after. But what they need more is actually spending time in that career to see whether it's right for them. The people who are getting into debt for courses they would never do. And I just feel like we need a break somewhere in between. So I'm a strong advocate for that. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to do. But I think just hearing what you said reassures me about my thoughts and the way I feel about these.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the A-level work experience, that has a double-edged sword really in terms of its objective. It's not about you gaining an insightful experience. It's about filling up employment opportunities, and that is that. I think when it comes to gap year experiences, and I'm looking at students who arrive at university late because they chose themselves to take a gap year, I do find that they're more mature in their processes. But I agree, it's not just taking a gap year by choice, it's by making sure that there's a plan set in place. And the hard thing about this is you've got the foundation education and you've got higher education working separately. But there needs to be something that bridges the gap so that they arrive hitting the ground running. And I absolutely agree. I think something needs to be done there to improve the chances of students picking the right courses if they need to be here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. And from a personal experience as well, before I went into speech and language therapy, whilst I was kind of in a deciding stage, my mum actually said to me, why don't you go and shadow a therapist for a day and just see what they do and see if this is really something that you're interested in. And I took her up on that. I managed to shadow a therapist actually in the borough that I'm working in now, which is interesting. But it was really good. And from that experience, I thought, wow, this is really what I want to do. And I think because I knew that this was what I wanted to do, even when I've came across difficulties along the way, along my journey of education and work, I kind of stuck at it because I knew that this was something that I was interested in. So yeah, definitely agree that work experience is definitely handy. And I would advise anyone who's listening who might be, you know, unsure of what they want to do to just try and seek out those opportunities as well. But back to you, Rex.
Sorry to interject, a quick question just about, or comment about work experience and stuff like that, and gap years and things like that. obviously there's a lot of factors that influence being able to have the opportunity to take a gap year, to have work experience and stuff like that. You know, some people would like to go on to university, but because of their sort of financial background or things like that, it's a bit more difficult for them. And sometimes for certain people, they may not have access to people who would be able to kind of give them that work experience in the place that they're looking in, the area that they're interested in. So they may not have an uncle that's an accountant, or mum's friend that's a speech and language therapist. So I often kind of think about those sort of students as well, who, you know, as we said, there's lots of different routes. There's lots of practical routes as well for other things. But in terms of helping those sort of students, and you know, do you know of any sort of schemes or any sort of advice for those sort of students where they don't have that link, they don't have that connection, they don't have that person to guide them? Because a lot of students, especially in certain, if you're in a certain school, you're not necessarily going to get the best guidance. Like, you know, back in my day, you know, because I'm slightly older than everyone, in terms of careers advice at school, it was literally, here's a book, look through and see what subjects match your uni thing. So there wasn't any guidance. So what would that person do? That person that doesn't have any, they don't have ideas about, let's say, speech therapy or being a lecturer, because there's no one around and no one can advise them. Is there anywhere that they could go?
Yeah, that's another good question. You guys are doing really well. So if we look at the university, and I guess if we think before university, it's going to be too late. If we look at the university's perspective, we can see that we've got this widening participation program. So this is for targeting students who are from the low income areas and trying to build a community and support system so that we can give them a holistic level of support, whether it's employability and access to employability, and whether it's even study support, having the right materials. So I think the university has done quite well in trying to identify those students based on the applications, the UCAS applications that have come through and the income assessments, and then trying to build that community. But there's that fall in the middle, and they're the ones I keep in contact, especially on my other mobile phone on WhatsApp. I keep in contact with them a lot. And what you identify actually is they do not see uni as a path towards a successful career. Rather, it could be, and I'm not speaking for all of them, even though it sounds like I'm generally speaking, it's a backup. So if university is a backup in terms of, okay, can I, with my degree, what can I get? If they haven't asked that question, then they're going, okay, what am I doing right now? So they never give up their day-to-day jobs if they have that. They never give up whatever they're learning on the streets. So with that in mind, it's trying to give them a bit more insight into, okay, that is the decision you have made and we can't question that. We do not know your circumstances, but please have a view, because you're in the arena now, have a view of what's available to you that you're currently considering as a backup. I did have an interesting conversation with a student who had a lot of criminal records, and he was known as a troubled student when I first started as a lecturer. And I got into a meeting pod with him, so just me and him, and he started talking and I didn't flinch, and that surprised him. He said, "You're the first person that hasn't shown any emotion when I'm talking about my past." And I said, "Quite frankly, I care for you, but I don't care about your past. You're here for a reason, you're enrolled, let's do this. What are you interested in?" He said he's interested in accounting qualification or financial qualification. He asked for my feedback and review, and I said, look, for me to be a qualified accountant, they did ask if I had a criminal record. So you might be checked. He did his research. He got down on his research because he realized with his criminal record, he cannot qualify as an accountant or a financial advisor. Long story short, it didn't stop him. He realized that someone's looking out for him if he wants to take this path, and this path is possible. And last week, we got a lovely email saying that with our backing, because he did what we asked him to do, he got our support. With our backing, CFA has accepted his application to become a qualified financial advisor. So again, there's so many systems that are set up, and I want people to be aware that it's not going to be easy at all, but it's set up to look at the masses, but it doesn't mean you can't get through. It does not mean you cannot get through. So it's important to understand the players that influences those decisions. And I'm saying this not illegally, I'm talking about illegally. That you know the players in the game, you get the advice, you put the effort in, and you will get noticed, most certainly. There is a path through, absolutely. But to wrap that answer up, it's definitely important that people are aware that we are here for them, even if it feels like we are discriminative. I've got a couple of colleagues, white colleagues, who are concerned of some perceptions students have of them, but they understand why. And they would love for them to reach out. So just reach out and let them prove the point that whether they're racist or not, let them prove it.
That's really good advice.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's go back and just talk a bit, because actually what I've seen from this conversation is that, you know, you've shown really good perseverance. You have come so far despite all of the challenges. I just wanted to ask you, what were your biggest challenges along the way, and how did you go about facing them?
I think if I look back, the biggest challenges, if it's career-wise, is taking opportunities that when I looked at my current skill set, I did not feel confident enough to do it. I mean, I'm a confident person, you know me very well, but at the same time, I'm a very reserved person. So when I'm working as a financial analyst and you've got the education sector telling me, come and work for us full time, knowing I absolutely hate talking to more than 2 people, 3 people at that point. And I had no clue. In fact, I studied to get the first class degree. I didn't study because I was entirely fascinated by the text. And that's the world I'm going to enter into. How on earth am I going to do this? So it's almost a challenge in itself to say, okay, as a Black person and being young, would you fit in? So I found the challenge of becoming a lecturer very difficult. But I think naturally it was something that you can get done. So even though I didn't like it, when I first had my first talk with 200 people there, my legs were shaking. I thought I sounded like a sheep. But everyone's looking at me and I'm thinking, what can I do? In fact, let me tell you a bit more detail about that story. I was going to give a talk which the program leader then asked what I was going to talk about. So he had my plans. So I thought, let me come in 15 minutes early just to see what he's saying. Everything I planned to say, my guy was saying. So I thought, and the worst thing is he ended it with, isn't that right, Rex? And I was like, damn right, it was right. It was what I was going to say. So I'm sitting there thinking, my first chance to speak to all of these university students and other lecturers, and he's just taken everything I planned to do. But actually that was a blessing in disguise. I just threw myself in, improvised, and it worked well. In fact, I realized I enjoyed that. I turned the nervousness into actually enjoying the moment. So that challenge done, I then went into a classroom. I was given a tax textbook, so I teach tax, but I wasn't really great at tax. And I thought, okay, cool, this is going to be interesting. They're giving me this textbook for a reason. I'll get into the class, again, nerves hit. The student in the front row says, this guy shouldn't even be here. Like, why is he taking this job? And you can hear that they're saying that, and you can hear them as you start. And I'm only 15 minutes in. Like, Lord help me. Yes. So I thought, okay, this is not good. But again, it was just persevering through, saying, look, you've got this. You've got a lot of people believing in you. Let's prove them not wrong, but let's prove them to see whether this is true, if I'm ready for this. So learning, adapting to a new role, adapting to a new environment, adapting to a new way of working is something I find challenging. I've done it all my life in terms of the roles I've been in, whether I'm in Tesco in the commercial world, whether I'm in Marsh & McLennan, a US-owned company with its own politics, and also when I'm in education with a lot of PhD-minded people when all I have is my qualification. How do I stand out? And so trying to figure out my lane is definitely the main challenge that I had as a person at the moment.
Wow, that sounds good. And I love that story. It's not a good experience, but it did make me laugh. So
I knew you would laugh at my pain. That's all right.
And I mean, I think you've touched on this already, but what would you say are is your experience of being a Black man in leadership, and a young Black man in leadership at that?
Mm.
A hard experience. I'll say being a Black man comes with perception. I didn't want to say this on someone that doesn't like to take the general scheme, but it's true. It came to a point where if there was a disagreement, I'll be conceived as someone who's aggressive, even when I'm not aggressive. So it was a bit strange. I have stories, I won't say what the setting is, but my colleagues from that previous experience will be aware. I've had situations where the racial experiences were right in the face, coming from going to an event in a suit and being told by the person who knew me that the plates are ready to be collected, to having to having weekly meetings, thinking, am I being performance checked after having the greatest appraisal ever, to then have weekly meetings starting off by, oh, so why do Black people get bothered by the N-word? So I've seen it all. I've seen it all. It exists, but at the same time, sorry to take the interview there, but I wanted to be honest. But at the same time, I would say there are great people. There's a lot more great people that will support you. I don't want people to ignore that in my experience. So the challenge is those people who are racist will try and get you out of your position. And that was the toughest challenge, being aware of that. But great colleagues of mine always tell me this is the case. So I was able to prepare for it and work through it. I think there's some blessings to it as well. So that's why I always have this theme of look for opportunities. Yes, I have students who first saw me and apparently complained because they said, look, how is this person my final year module leader for taxation? This can't be true. Can't you guys afford a serious academic? I paid my £10,000 and you got this guy in front of me. I've had all of that. But at the same time, that same person at the end of the course thanked me and said I was the best lecturer they've had. So the key thing is just keep going. I had to just keep going. In light of this, we've got the BAME agenda happening at this very moment in time. And that's the new opportunity that has come up for me. So it's not about saying, okay, this is tokenism. It's about recognizing that I am an important player in the game, that I am a person who's gone through and experienced higher education. I am in higher education and I'm doing something about the BAME agenda. In fact, that's what my doctorate will be on. So having that in mind, I think it's important to be aware of your surroundings, aware of your challenges, but there's always an opportunity through. I haven't found for one moment, because institutionally there is a way around things. I haven't found one moment where I felt I was blocked, shall I say. There's always a way around things, always.
And I think that's really,
I like that. Yeah,
that's really,
I agree. There is always a way around everything, and it's just about, you know, thinking. Even though people use this phrase all the time, it is about thinking outside of the box. It is about persevering. It is about not letting certain people, because you kind of let them win, you know, if you just give in to what they're saying. So not letting them win, reaching out to people, the people who are good to you, reach out to them and keep, you know, in contact with them, and just the ones that are idiots, leave them to the side.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's also reflective as a student when you ask me about student advice, that not all of them are racist. So it's easy for us to look at one circumstance and go, they're all like that. I'm not approaching anyone. But actually, without the team, I wouldn't be where I am right now. So identifying those who are there for you is equally as important as identifying those who aren't. So it's very important to know that, and they'll give you the way through. For instance, to get this principal lecturer role is very difficult to get if you don't have the PhD, if you don't have the doctoral studies. I was told that in terms of trying to apply for it. But when I was reaching out to other universities and going to events and conferences, I noticed a lot of the heads of groups, as in the heads of the subjects, writing notes about what I've been saying and asking me to take on jobs that were principal lecturer level. So when I saw that, I didn't go, okay, I'm jumping ship. I forwarded those messages on to my university and say, have a look at that. Then they had to think again about their policies. So it's all about trying to influence what's going on to make sure there's a way through, definitely. And that's happened since I was a student.
I just ask, just because we talk a lot, like in terms of our profession as allied health professionals, in terms of the reflection of people of BAME origin, especially probably Black people, in positions of leadership. What do you see, like in your profession, and probably like just in general anyway, like what do you really see, like in terms of lots of Black people in leadership, and what do you think about all of that sort of dynamics for representation and all of that?
I think there's now a raised awareness, but there's a bit of tick boxing or reactionary actions happening at the moment. And I think it's going to take a matter of time, maybe a generation, before we get to start to see people in leadership roles and without unfair scrutiny. If I look at the accounting profession, there are plenty, in my opinion, there are now plenty of Black professionals in accounting. But when you look at CEOs, COOs, CFOs, then it dwindles. So there's a lot of paper leaders, I call them. They've got the certificate, now what? So it's all about, that's why when I took this role, I said, okay, let's try and impact people by getting their character aligned. And so right now I'm teaching quite a few students who I believe will be the next leaders, and they need to think a bit further abroad. So rather than focusing on trying to take the seat locally, so by looking at leadership roles within their vicinity, I'm a London born and bred, so I need to be in a company in London, or it must be Deloitte. You know how we like to brand things. It must be in PwC. I work for PwC, even though you're the cleaner there. Come on, we're not going for that. We're going for the situation where you can create yourself, and it doesn't have to always be in the brand company. It doesn't have to be always be in the UK. So I'm really satisfied to see that students are starting to see that. Therefore, go to Ghana, PwC Ghana if you have to, go to Africa, go to the US, try and build yourself. There's plenty of companies that need people to lead, and practice your leadership roles. If you're going for the big brand organizations, yes, you look great, but there's not many seats available. There's 1,000, in fact, they have an ongoing, I've never seen this before, an ongoing application, because people just go in and come out. Not many people make it. So find that small company that needs you. It could be your own company that needs yourself to grow something. So I think that side of things, trying to find the avenues where you can exercise your leadership rights, is something that needs to happen a bit more. I'm hoping that there'll be more leadership training courses that are given and infiltrated within education as well, because that's not given. They need to be more scenario based, because we've got how to manage people. That's a big thing, stressful thing. Yeah, you see the dollar signs or the pound signs and you sign it straight away, not realizing how much stress comes with that. Stress, you have to care about other people. Caring about other people, that's a skill. Yeah. And then you've got other leadership roles where you are responsible for the financial decision making, you're responsible for the outcome of things. Those require resilience, those require certain training skills that not just are learnt, but are observed. So that opportunity needs to be given, most certainly, and mistakes need to be allowed to be made.
So we're coming to the end now. And Rex, I just want to ask you a final 2 questions. The first being, what would you say if you could travel back in time and speak to Rex starting his career? So what would you tell your younger self?
Okay. Say no more to favors, say yes more to opportunities. Because as a Black person, you always want to prove yourself, right? And sometimes we angle proving ourselves to doing favors for people you think are above you, but they're different to taking up opportunities. Not everything they ask you to do are considered as opportunities, they're favors. So also take on opportunities that you're afraid of more. It doesn't matter, no one cares, sort of thing, but yourself really, and that's how it should be. Even if you've got people that love you, make sure you care for yourself the most in the decisions you make.
Fantastic. And have you got any take-home messages that you want to say to listeners?
Okay, I think you've got a wide range of audience, so I really want to target students out there. In fact, I've just finished marking, so I don't know if you can see my eye bags here. Just finished marking a couple of papers, and these are with students I know very well since day one. and it's clear to see I couldn't save them all. So in my heart and in my mind, it's very important character-wise that students are aware of their surroundings, they're aware of what they're going through, and they can seek help if they need it. Do not rely on friends. I did a quick little study where I was giving information out, and I wanted to know where the student got that information from. And 80% of the students relied on friends to tell them rather than me. And there was a lot of that habits going on. And I had to tell students, listen, your friends are important, but when it comes to, I'm sure you heard this analogy for heaven, when it comes to getting your degree certificate, they're not going to call you and your friend to collect one certificate. You're not going to have a joint job. You're not sharing salary. So that is your competition as well. So make sure you stay to source from day one. Be open about who you are and what you want to achieve. And if you don't know, be open about that. And for goodness sake, if you don't know, you do not know what you're talking about. Yeah. So most certainly make sure you are sure with yourself that you know what's going on. The amount of time we speak to students, are you sure you know that? Yeah. And you hear them whisper, what the hell is he on about? Make sure you understand it's £10,000 for most of you. So please add value to what you're doing, whether you want to do it or not.
Yeah, brilliant. And just a follow-up question, actually. So that would be a message for students. Have you got a message for people who are already in their jobs, in terms of, and already in their careers, in terms of how they can actually help support students? Because, for example, with my job, sometimes I have students who come in and who I have to supervise for a certain period of time as they're on their work placement. Have you got any tips for us in terms of how we can better support students?
Throw the rule book away. Because what I've noticed is even when I was supporting students in the professional world, it was a matter of making sure they were aware of the skill set. But if they are lost, they don't know why they're there, then it's a waste of time. So it's important to get to know the student first and to know why they're there. If you realize that they don't know and they don't want to be there, then you've saved a lot of your time. If they need help, you will then find it there. Example I had was when I went to teach in China, and then a couple of the students came back from China to study their final year at the University of Hertfordshire. They were very timid and scared to approach me because they had to show me work. So it was very transactional. That's what I'm saying, throw the rule book away. I decided to ignore the work, had a look at the students' information and opened up Google Maps. I said, show me where you live, where you come from. That was the conversation I had for 20 minutes. The next day, that student came with a different persona, with the work and motivated to go on. I think just trying to know the person will be something that's incredible in terms of identifying what's needed to be done for that student to do what they need to do when you're supporting them, that's for sure.
So that was our interview with Rex. We had a really good time talking to him and hearing about all the amazing things that he has achieved and continues to achieve. And we didn't actually talk about all the different hats that he wears. So yes, it was a really good conversation and we hope that you got as much out of it as we did. So thank you again, Rex, for your time. And please feel free to message us, engage with us if you have anything that you want to share. A special shout out to all the students that have messaged us in the past. We hope that Rex's advice is helpful for you, and yeah, just let us know how you found everything and what you thought. So until next time,
bye.
Bye.